Hello, welcome to Bigger Pockets. This is Lisa Phillips, and today's episode is appreciation and what needs to be said about it. A lot of investors I hear in casual conversation are very sure about their investment properties. They might have, they like the fact that they have good neighborhoods and they have credit conscious tenants who give them on average less troubles than maybe in distressed neighborhoods where the jobs aren't so good and the tenants may not have such sterling credit. And they're very happy with that, and they're holding out on 20 to 30 years even though they have very little cash flow. It'll probably appreciate really well in that time by the time you pay it off, and you get the appreciation for retirement. And then at that point you have a great property in a good neighborhood that you can rely on. However, I was always a little skeptical about this because I don't hear information of why the appreciation should be guaranteed in 20 to 30 years, and I'm going to tell you why I am skeptical from doing my own work in working class neighborhoods. Now, what I do see though, most people have little to zero cash flow, but they have the complete leverage of owning the property. So those vacants really make a difference. And on the other side, I see like such an acceptance, the same amount of acceptance I saw in 2006 that property values will always rise. And so when I look at the neighborhoods that I'm in, the thing that I've noticed being on the ground and being in all these three different states and looking at all these different neighborhoods and submitting bids on all these sub 30K properties and working class neighborhoods is that the one thing that determines if your house will appreciate really for the most part seems to be jobs. I'm in neighborhoods that 20, 30 years ago used to be like the best part of town and had a ton of people in them and were fully vacant, and you know, the architecture is amazingly beautiful because the people that live there paid extra for the upgrades. And when I look at all the properties that I tend to buy in now, so they used to be really good in their heydays, and this can span 20, 30, or 40 years, but the main component is that jobs went away. The most obvious one is manufacturing jobs in a lot of different cities and states. That was the main bulk of all the economic activity. Those went away. But something a little bit more subtle that maybe needs to look at. What if like in Baltimore, they have all these different people working for the city utilities, but now they're slowly getting electric meters. So we don't need a meter man to go around and check everything. That they think has a projection of 25% job losses. We already know that administrative assistants, those jobs are going away because they've outsourced it on the internet to various places like Odesk or Elance. And even financial institutions, for as much money are they making, I hear every single month about 20,000 jobs lost at Chase, 25,000 at Goldman Sachs. And it just goes to show that for those local areas, those are jobs that kept the economy going, that kept the pricing up, that are slowly going away. And so I say, so what about 30 years? Is your property in a place where the jobs all come from one institution? Then I would really say look very closely at that institution. And it's very obvious. There's some towns where the college is the complete source of funding. Outside of that, it'd be very small mom and pop shops, but not a lot of large employment opportunities. So are you in one of these colleges that they're looking at that they think about 1/3 of private colleges in the next 20 years won't be here? If you're in one of those places where it's good now, but you're one of those colleges that's not really competitive to charge the rates they've charged that facilitated the growth that they did, that's something that can go away. And I know I'm in the DC area, but more and more I think people across the country are a little fed up with government spending. And so now you have, debates all the time about cutting funding, and you don't know how that's going to go. You can think that this party we've had is going to keep going with the Fed doing $85 billion to their buddies at the banks, and we're arguing over the debt ceiling increase or not, but I think a certain recognition has to come that the party might be coming to an end in the next 20 years. And so what I'm trying to say is this is just not to scare you so much as I've always been skeptical, because when I'm on the ground I see how if your full economy is based off one big industry, I see how vulnerable it is because I'm buying them up at record prices 20, 30 years later. And this doesn't need to scare you. What I would do if you're in this boat and you realize that economically this might be a place that you know, if this goes away, there's nothing else. You know, there's strategies you can take. What you can do, I think the first big one is, instead of paying it off in 30 years, you pay it off in 15. And that way, you know, you're there a little quicker before we get to the full ramifications of if the school, the university, or that government institution or entity that anchored the town goes away. So instead of waiting 30 years, you just up your amortization and go ahead and pay extra to pay it off in 15. That's one way to circumvent this decline that may come depending on the place, and appreciation of the property that you sold. And also another way to combat that is if you're looking like you might be in a more vulnerable situation where 30 years down the road, this town that you're in only relies on one industry, you also can diversify your portfolio. So maybe you have a couple of properties that are really solid, although no cash flow, but when you retire, you'd prefer that property to manage, you know, when you don't want to be bothered. You diversify your portfolio with something more in working class neighborhood or a mobile home. And I just say this, it's a hedge, you know, so you have some cash coming in just in case that appreciation is not there, but you paid all that money for this property. You at least had something over the years to fall back on and create your savings and to make your slush fund just in case the appreciation isn't as high as you want. So that is I only do working class neighborhoods. I've done this in 3 states. I've lowballed a lot. I submitted offers on many, and I've walked many different neighborhoods. And so that's what I really see. So that's where my skepticism comes from on the promise of appreciation and what's going to be there 20 to 30 years down the road. And if you have any thoughts, please let me know. I'm not attacking it so much as wanting to share what I see about distressed properties and how they got there, and how I see it could happen to other places depending on what area they're in. So this is Lisa Phillips with Bigger Pockets. Thank you very much.